I want to look at Ephesians 6:12 right now. So if you want to go there, if you got a Bible. And let's look at the armor of God and why we need it. Oh, wow. Wow, my Bible. Oh, no. No, it doesn't. Okay. All right, here we go. Let's start in verse 10. Finally, in the Lord, this is the New International Version. Be strong in the Lord and in his mighty power. Put on the full armor of God so that you can take your stand against the devil's schemes. Okay? Or so that you might be able to, God is so that we can withstand the devil. So far, that's what we're reading. Why? So why? Next verse tells us, verse 12, for our struggle is not against flesh and blood, that would be men, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. So, the armor is so that we can stand against spiritual rulers and authorities Wow. The King James says, for we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, and against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. The armor of God is a spiritual armor for a spiritual enemy, for a spiritual battle. In the evil day. Let's go on. Because it says in verse 13 in the King James, it says, wherefore take unto you, put on the whole armor of God, so that you can withstand in the evil day, and having done all to stand. Verse 14, stand therefore. It's the armor is so that we can be able to stand in the evil day. That evil day was back then, and that evil day extends all the way to today, because we have yet to see the return of the Lord. The last days, one of the mysteries of the last days is that it extends from the first century church, from actually Jesus Christ, all the way to now and into the future until Jesus comes back, which is very soon into the future. For certain things must first take place, for it is for an appointed time. There's an appointed time. There's a time for everything. There's a time, I believe it's Psalms or Proverbs that says that there's a time for everything. And there's a season. And this is that season. The Revelation 12 sign marks this last days season is coming to a close. The final 7 years, the time of Jacob's trouble. Okay, the reign of the Antichrist, the 7-year tribulation, the 42 months of his reign, the outpouring of the wrath of God, the tribulation of the saints, the 7-year tribulation of the saints, and the 3.5-year wrath of God. So, let's take a look at something. Let's take a look at what Jesus said about the last days. Let's take a look at Matthew. Matthew 24. Verse 3. As Jesus was sitting on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately. "Tell us," they said, "when will this happen? And what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age?" Jesus answered, "Watch out that no one deceives you. For many will come in my name, claiming I am the Christ, and will deceive many. And you will hear of wars and rumors of wars. But see to it that you're not alarmed. Such things must happen, but the end is still to come." All right, there's your first sign right there that first things have to happen. Things have to happen. Certain things have to happen first before he can return and establish his kingdom. Okay? He just said that right here. "See to it that you're not alarmed. Such things must happen, but the end is still to come. Nation will rise against nation," which actually is nationality, against nationality, race, "and kingdom against kingdom." There will be, because otherwise that would be a redundant statement. "There will be famines and earthquakes in various places, and these are the beginning of birth pangs." Why does he refer to it as birth pangs? "Then you will be handed over to be persecuted and put to death, and you will be hated by all nations because of me. At that time, many will turn away from the faith and will betray and hate one another." Did you hear that? That's Matthew 24:9. He says, then you'll be handed over to be persecuted and put to death, and you'll be hated by all nations because of me. We're seeing the beginning of that right now. At that time, many will turn away from the faith and will betray and hate one another. That's happening right now. And many false prophets will appear and deceive many people. That's happening right now. Mark Taylor, to name one. Perry Stone, to name another. Because of the increase of wickedness, the love of most will grow cold. That's a pretty harsh, that's a pretty big statement to say most. The love of most will grow cold. Why? Because the increase of wickedness, the love of many will grow cold. But he who stands firm to the end will be saved. That's the gospel. That's the truth. That's the good news in this dark time of nothing but bad news. The good news is that he who stands firm to the end will be saved. And this gospel of the kingdom will be preached in the whole world as a testimony to all nations, and then the end will come. So, when you see standing in the holy place the abomination that causes desolation, spoken of through the prophet Daniel, let the reader understand. Then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. He's talking about the abomination of desolation, where the Antichrist walks into the temple of God, showing himself to be God, and declares himself to be God to the world. That's Daniel, okay? Which takes place. That's a whole other subject. But it relates to the end times. That's why Jesus himself is talking about this. All right? So when you see standing in the holy place the abomination that causes desolation, spoken of through the prophet Daniel, let the reader understand. Then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Let no one on the roof of his house go down to take anything out of the house. Let no one in the field go back to get his cloak. How dreadful it will be in those days for pregnant women and nursing mothers. Pray that your flight will not take place in winter or on the Sabbath, for then there will be great distress, unequaled from the beginning of the world until now, and never to be equaled again. If those days had not been cut short, no one would survive. But for the sake of the elect, those days will be shortened. Okay. So, but for the sake of the elect, those days will be shortened. Okay, that's the time that the Antichrist comes on the scene. And Jesus Christ is saying that for the sake of the elect are still going to be there. He's not saying that this is when he comes back. This is your first sign that there's no pre-tribulation rapture. Okay? We are going to be here. For the sake of the elect, those days will be shortened. Okay? Because it is the greatest tribulation that the world has ever seen and will ever see. Will ever see. And he says, at that time, if anyone says to you, look, here's the Christ, or there he is, don't believe it. For false Christs and false prophets will appear and perform great signs and miracles to deceive even the elect, if that were possible. See, I've told you ahead of time. He's telling us this ahead of time so that when it happens, we will recognize what's going on. Guys, listen. This stuff is happening. This stuff is happening. All this stuff that he's talking about is happening. And if you want to see it, just look around. Google this stuff. See what comes up in the news. See what not just only mainstream, but see what independent news networks and independent journalists are reporting through their researches and their investigative journalisms. Because we can't trust the media, the mainstream media, who's controlled by these rulers, to give us the whole truth, if any truth at all. Because the rulers of this world are wicked. And they're only there to deceive as many people as possible. So if anyone tells you, verse, out in the desert, go not out. Or here he is, in the inner rooms, don't believe it. For as the lightning comes from the east and is visible even in the west, so will be the coming of the Son of Man. Wherever the carcass is, there the vultures will gather. And then there's the key verse right here. This is it. Okay, this is the nail in the coffin for all the pre-trib rapturalists. Okay, because when Jesus comes back, he comes back in the power of the resurrection and resurrects first the dead in Christ, like Thessalonians says, and then we who are alive and remain will be caught up in the clouds, will be caught up in the air to meet the Lord in the clouds, forever will be with the Lord. And right here, Jesus says in verse 29, immediately after the distress of those days, or the tribulation of those days, the sun will be darkened, and the moon will not give its light, and the stars will fall from the sky, and the heavenly bodies will be shaken, or the powers of heaven shall be shaken. At that time, the sign of the Son of Man will appear in the sky, and all the nations of the earth will mourn. They will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of the sky with power and great glory, and he will send his angels with a loud trumpet call, and they will gather his elect from the four winds, from one end of the heavens to the other. I'm sorry, when does this the Son of Man seen coming in the clouds with his angels to gather his elect from the four corners of heaven? When does that happen? Let's see. Let's go back. Verse 29. Immediately after the tribulation of those days. There it is, guys. There it is, right there. Immediately after the tribulation of those days. The sun will be darkened, and the moon will not give its light, and the stars will fall to the sky, and the heavens, the powers of the heavens will be shaken. And at that time, the sign of the Son of Man will appear in the sky or in the heavens, and the nations of the earth will mourn, and they will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of the sky with power and great glory, and he will send his angels with a loud trumpet call, and they will gather his elect from the four winds, from one end of the heavens to the other. Wow. Wow. Therefore, wow. And he speaks a parable. It's not therefore, sorry. Verse 32. Now learn this lesson from the fig tree, Jesus says. As soon as its twigs get tender and its leaves come out, you know that summer is near. And what does the fig tree represent? We know that the fig tree represents Israel. Even so, when you see all these things happen, you know that it is near, right at the door. I tell you the truth. This generation that sees all these things happening will certainly not pass away until all these things have happened. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will never pass away. No one knows about that day or hour, not even the angels in heaven, nor the Son, but only the Father. As it was in the days of Noah, So it will be at the coming of the Son of Man. For in the days before the flood, people were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, up to the day Noah entered the ark, and they knew nothing about what would happen until the flood came and took them all away. That is how it will be at the coming of the Son of Man. Wow. Two women will be grinding with a mill. One will be taken, the other left. Therefore, keep watch, because you do not know on what day your Lord will come. But understand this: if the owner of the house had known at what time of the night the thief was coming, he would have kept watch and would not have let his house be broken into. So you also must be ready, because the Son of Man will come in an hour when you do not expect him. Who then is the faithful and wise servant, who the master has put in charge of the servants in his household to give them their food at the proper time? It'll be good for that servant whose master finds him doing so when he returns. I tell you the truth, he will put him in charge of all his possessions. But suppose that servant is wicked and says to himself, my master is staying away a long time, and he then begins to beat his fellow servants and to eat and drink with the drunkards. The master of that servant will come on a day when he does not expect him, and at an hour he's not aware of. He will cut him to pieces and assign him a place with the hypocrites, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. He will assign his own servant a place with the hypocrites. Doesn't take it seriously. Wow. And then, wow. And this is great. This is great. And then we've got chapter 25. And this is a continuation. At that time, the kingdom of heaven will be like 10 virgins who took their lamps and went out to meet the bridegroom. 5 of them were foolish and 5 were wise. The foolish ones took their lamps, but did not take any oil with them. The wise, however, took oil in jars along with their lamps. The bridegroom was a long time in coming, and they all became drowsy and fell asleep. At midnight the cry rang out, "Here's the bridegroom! Come out to meet him!" Then all the virgins woke up and trimmed their lamps. The foolish ones said to the wise, "Give us some of your oil, our lamps are going out." "No," they replied, "there may not be enough for both of us and you. Instead, go to those who sell oil and buy some yourselves." But while they were on their way to buy the oil, the bridegroom arrived. The virgins who were ready went in with him to the wedding banquet, and the door was shut. Later, the others also came. "Sir, sir," they said, "open the door for us." But he replied, "I tell you the truth, I don't know you. Therefore keep watch, because you do not know the day or the hour." Again, it will be like a man going on a journey who called his servants and entrusted his property to them. The one who gave 5 talents of money, to another 2 talents, and to another 1 talent, each according to his ability. Then he went on his journey. The man who had received 5 talents went at once and put his money to work and gained 5 more. So also the one with the 2 talents gained 2 more. But the man who had received the 1 talent went off, dug a hole in the ground, and hid his master's money. After a long time, the master of those servants returned and settled amounts with them. The man who had received the 5 talents brought the other 5. Master, he said, you entrusted me with 5 talents. See, I have gained 5 more. His master replied, well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness. The man with the 2 talents also came. Master, he said, you entrusted me with 2 talents. See, I have gained 2 more. His master replied, well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness. Then the man who had received the 1 talent came. Master, he said, where you have not sown, and gathering, where you have not scattered seed. So I was afraid, and I went out and hid your talent in the ground. See, here is what belongs to you. His master replied, you wicked, lazy servant. So you knew that I harvest where I have not sown, and gather where I have not scattered seed? Well then, you should have put my money on deposit with the bankers, so that when I returned, I would have received it back with interest. Take the talent from him and give it to the one who has the 10 talents. For everyone who has will be given more, and he will have an abundance. Whoever does not have, even what he has will be taken from him, and throw that worthless servant outside into the darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. When the Son of Man comes in his glory, in verse 31, of chapter 25, when the Son of Man comes in his glory and all the angels with him, he will sit on his throne in heavenly glory. All the nations will be gathered before him, and he will separate the people one from another, as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. He will put the sheep on his right and the goats on his left. Then the king will say to those on his right, come, you who are blessed by my Father, take your inheritance, the kingdom prepared for you since the creation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in. I needed clothes, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you looked after me. I was in prison, and you came to visit me. Then the righteous will answer him, Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink? When did we see you a stranger and invite you in, or need clothing and clothe you? When did we see you sick or in prison and go visit you? The king will reply, I tell you the truth. Whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers of mine, you did it for me. Then he will say to those on his left, depart from me, you who are cursed, into the eternal fire prepared for the devil and his angels. For I was hungry, and you gave me nothing to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me nothing to drink. I was a stranger, and you didn't invite me in. I needed clothes, and you didn't clothe me. I was sick and in prison, and you didn't look after me. They also will answer, these goats. This is the goat's answer. Lord, when did we see you hungry, or thirsty, or a stranger, or needing clothes, or sick, or in prison, and did not help you? And he will reply, I tell you the truth. Whatever you did not do for one of the least of these, you did not do it for me. Then they will go away to eternal punishment, but the righteous to eternal life. And that's the truth. That's the truth. Pretty amazing.